Hurry to Subway restaurants for the new Smokehouse Barbecue Chicken. Tender pulled chicken topped with sweet and tangy barbecue sauce on your choice of freshly baked bread. Try it as a 6-inch fresh fit sub or $6 footlong special for a limited time only. Subway. Eat fresh.
The BS Report is a free-flowing conversation that occasionally touches on mature subjects.
First of all,
this is the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
It might be cool, I don't know. And if it's not, I don't care.
The BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Bill Simmons works for ESPN. He's also named the sports guy, and he writes a comical sports column. He must be a popular dude.
The BS Report.
It's got a real dirty sound, like a rusty steak knife cutting through a well-aged steak.
Now.
Here's Bill Simmons.
Welcome to the BS Report. Hazy Monday here in Southern California. Not hazy in New York City, where the NFL draft comes Thursday night. Our football guy, one of them, our favorite. No disrespect to Bill Barnwell, but the guy who's been on the BS Report the longest. Our longest tenured BS Report contributor in the NFL, Mike Lombardi. What's happening?
Hello, Bill.
You knew that Tattaglia was a pimp and that Barzini, it was him all along. And you also know what's going to happen with this NFL 2012 draft. Most interesting thing to me is the fact that the Vikings are sitting there with the third pick. It seems like it's a 6-player draft and then a drop-off. Now it seems like people are picking apart Justin Blackman a little bit, but doesn't seem like the Vikings totally want to make that pick. I always enjoy when this happens, when a team is staring at the pick going, I don't totally love this pick, but please trade for this, anybody, and then they can't, and then they have to make the pick. What do you think happens there?
I think short of taking a full-page ad in the New York Times and the L.A. Times, the Vikings have tried to trade the pick, but can't generate the business, and your point is well taken. I mean, it's probably just a 4-player draft. I'm not sure Morris Claiborne or Justin Blackman are elite players in the league. I think it's going to take them a little time in the right niche, but for the sake of argument, let's say there is a 6-player draft. The Vikings don't really want to move away from one of those 6 players into a zone where they're not sure what they're going to get, and to do it isn't going to be as lucrative as they once thought. I think they were trying to piggyback on the Ryan Tannehill love affair that was going on, and then they realized there was maybe only one team in love with Ryan Tannehill.
And who is that team?
They'll be the Miami Dolphins. I think that's still the case. I think they were trying to drum up business for somebody to get ahead of Cleveland, and then Cleveland has gone out of their way to say they're not taking a quarterback. They're in love with Colt McCoy, and they're not moving up. So it really hurt the plans of Rick Spielman and the Minnesota Vikings. But Minnesota can go in a lot of different directions because, look, they had 50 sacks last year, tops in the league. They only had 8 interceptions as a team. So they need some playmakers on the back end badly. And if they could get Claiborne or even Stephen Gilmore, I'm sure that would help their team. But I think they need the left tackle as much as anybody.
Well, I think the important thing for the Vikings is they have to figure out a way to protect Christian Ponder to enable him to reach his mediocre ceiling and be a 7-9 quarterback because, God forbid, he doesn't have enough protection. Here's what really fascinates me. So we can all agree Trent Richardson's the third best player in this draft, right?
Yes.
I mean, if you polled 100 personnel people, they would and they said who is the, other than the top 2 quarterbacks, who is the player that you would bet your life is going to be an excellent NFL starter? They would all say Trent Richardson, correct?
Yes.
Then why wouldn't he go third? Why do we have to do this dance every year where there's a player who's the obvious third best player, and just because Minnesota doesn't need a running back, that's, to me, it's like if I was one of the teams below number 4, and you know Cleveland's going to take Richardson 4, why not try to leapfrog into 3? Minnesota would love it. I'm sure all they want is like a second or a third rounder to move backwards. Why wouldn't one of these teams leapfrog Cleveland? Or if you're Minnesota, pretend one of those teams is trying to leapfrog them, and then you get, maybe you get a third rounder from Cleveland not to take them.
Well, I think that's what Minnesota's trying to do. They try to lure the Rams into coming back up after they traded down. Jacksonville wants to go south. Miami's going to stay right where they are, and Carolina doesn't need any more running backs. I think they've cornered the market on running backs. So, and now that presents the biggest problem for Minnesota is where do they move to? Where do they go in the draft? If they move out of 3, they could probably get a lot. I'm sure the Jets would love to come up and draft a running back, but is it going to equate to the value that you're going to be giving up? And who are they going to get when they pick at say, 16 where the Jets are? So I think there lies the biggest problem.
I'm glad you brought this up because, as always, I have a solution. I'm the VP of Common Sense. Steven Jackson. We all agree 2-3 years left maybe for him, elite level.
Well, the problem with Steven Jackson is he wants to redo his contract. I think he's not happy where he is, and I'm not sure that the Rams are happy with where he is, and they would like probably an adjustment. And, when running backs start to get nicked up and beat up, I mean, the end is near, and I think ultimately, you need somebody to come in and fix that for you. I would suspect that the Rams would take the running back as quickly as they could.
What's his value in the open market, Steven Jackson? Third rounder?
Fourth? I mean, look, Mike Brown got, Corey Dillon was probably closer to being done than Steven Jackson was as we relate the comparison. So I would say probably that would be a trade that you could look at. But now, here's the other problem. It isn't so much what you give up to get the player. It's how to redo Steven Jackson's contract. I don't think he's in the frame of mind to walk in there and be happy about taking a pay cut, and I think he's looking for a raise.
All right. So let's say, just go with me here. Let's say they flip Steven Jackson for whatever. It could be a third-round pick, fourth-round pick, doesn't matter. He goes to a contending team. He's been stuck on bad teams basically his entire career. And even if he wants to renegotiate his contract, he'll still be excited that he's on a good team. Maybe he'll back off that a little bit. Then the Rams trade up from 6 to 3. They got all these extra picks from the Redskins trade. They have a wealth of draft picks. Shouldn't that be the team that moves up to 3 and takes Richardson? Then the Vikings don't have to drop out of the top 6.
That to me makes the most sense, and I think that could be a conversation that happens on Thursday. I think that the Rams could really do themselves a lot of good by doing that, and they would give them another young player. I would rather have, people say, well, you have to have skilled players. I would rather have Richardson than make Justin Blackmon be my number one receiver. I like Blackmon. I'm just not sure he's a number one receiver.
Plus, if the Rams somehow move back, if they work this so they move back one spot just to pick up like 2 extra number one picks, and they get Richardson out of it, which was the guy they needed anyway, that's one of the best draft moves I think I've ever seen.
Yeah, I wouldn't disagree. I think that's certainly how the Rams should think. I'm sure the Rams are sitting there saying at 6 we'll still get a good player, we can keep all our picks, but 2 years from now, when you analyze the pick that you could have given up and the player that you could have given up to get Richardson, it probably would be a worthwhile deal to make.
Justin Blackmon, poor man's A.J. Green?
Different
or could he be another A.J. Green?
I don't think he's going to be another A.J. Green. I think the thing with Blackmon is he plays bigger than what he measures out. He's a yards after the catch receiver. He's what I call a rebound receiver. He's a guy that is going to be in a lot of traffic. He'll get the football. But when he has rolled coverage to him and he has some press coverage, I think it's going to be a little harder for him to separate. He's going to have to win with power more than he's going to win with his athleticism. Whereas A.J. Green can win with speed, he can win with power, and he just becomes faster the longer he runs.
So it sounds like you're worried about a little Michael Crabtree potential here.
A little bit. I'm a little bit worried about that. You always are concerned about receivers getting away. Now, I think he'll get away from press more with his power than he will with his quickness.
All right.
Look, here's the thing. Here's what I believe. And I thought this last year. I didn't think that Mark Ingram was the best running back on the University of at Alabama's team, and I still think Trent Richardson is by far that. And I don't think that if Blackmon and Des Bryant are still playing at Oklahoma State, Des Bryant's still the best receiver on that team.
Yeah. So Matt Khalil, give me the most likely outcome for his career with another player comparison. Best case scenario and worst case scenario.
I think Matt Khalil's going to be a really good football player. He's young. He's going to get nothing but better. He's going to be a left tackle that can play for a long time. You would like to think he becomes Gary Zimmerman. I mean, I think and I'm not trying to make him the Hall of Fame player, but I think he's athletic. He can move. He can dance. He's got the ability to play with power. I think he solves a lot of problems. The other factor if you're the Minnesota Vikings, and I wrote about this, if you're Rick Spielman, you've got to sit in your office and say, okay, where do I solve some of these other issues I have? If I don't take the left tackle, in what draft am I going to get a left tackle? Because we know free agency doesn't provide us with left tackles. We know it's hard to trade for a left tackle. So if I don't solve this left tackle with this pick, where do I solve it? Do I wait and maybe get it next year? Okay, well, let's not just take a chance on that. Let's look at next year's draft and see is there a left tackle available and can I get him? or do I wait on the running back, or do I wait on the wide receiver and feel like I can get him at some point? And I think the answer is wait on the receiver, wait on the corner, take the left tackle, because you can't replace the left tackle.
WWBBD, question mark. What would Bill Belichick do?
Bill Belichick would take the left tackle.
All right. That's all you need to know. That's what you should put in your mock, when you do your mock draft for Wednesday at NFL.com. You should just have a little thing under each one, WWBD, WWBD, or BBD.
It would really make all the Jet fans happy, wouldn't it?
Well, I want to know what Bill Belichick would do.
Well, I mean, Belichick's about, he's about winning in the lines. I mean, last year, he goes and drafts Nate Solder. He gets Marcus Cannon. He's about making sure his offensive and defensive lines are as strong as they can be. And the only way you can really do that adequately, I mean, you can try to piece it together like he did last year with Andre Carter and Mark Anderson. But the reality of it is, if you want to have a good defensive and offensive line, you better draft them.
So it sounds like you think this is a 4-player draft.
I really do. Look, Morris Claiborne's a nice player. I think he plays corner like a wide receiver. He wins later in the route. He's got good ball skills down the field like a wide receiver. But in terms of being physically tough and press and all those things, I'm not sure that's it. I think Gilmore probably can bring more to the table. I think the gap's closer to Gilmore and Claiborne than it is anyone else. And then, Blackman is, receivers, and I'm probably overly critical of receivers in my career because I feel like there's always a Denarius Moore in the 5th round that you could get that could come in and help your team.
Let's say the Rams do trade up and they steal Richardson at number 3. At that point, did the Browns just give up? I mean, the fans, do they just, that's it? They don't follow football anymore? Like, I'm sure they after the Robert Griffin III stomach punch that they thought they really were going to get him, that fell through. Now they're slowly talking themselves into Richardson.
I don't understand Mike Holmgren's comments on that. He's been on the competition committee with Jeff Fisher before. He knows Jeff Fisher and Mike Shanahan have a very close relationship. In fact, I think I said it on the BS report, and people tweeted me and say, if it was going to be a tie, Shanahan was going to win it. I mean, you've got to know what the opponents are. So I don't know where Mike was coming from with that. I think it was almost like, was he really trying to convince people he was interested? And what was he trying to accomplish with that statement? Because he knew all along that unless he was really going to go hard for it, that the Redskins were going to get it.
It reminded me of when you traded Belichick, Doug Gabriel, but hopefully with better results. I was all excited for Doug Gabriel. Didn't happen. Didn't work. Matt Khalil, if he doesn't go to 3, where does he fall to?
Well, then I think some of the teams, I'm sure Buffalo has to pick him at 10. I mean, Buffalo doesn't want to pick an offensive lineman. I know they need tackles, but I think Buffalo's making the right statement there.
Wait, so you think he could fall from 3 to 10?
Well, I don't think there's another team that's going to pick a left tackle. I don't think, obviously, let's go over it. Tampa Bay, they put a lot of money in Donald Penn. The Rams could pick him. Now, that would be another – they'd have 3 picks in the top 30 at the tackle position. It would make sense for the Rams. The Jaguars won't do it. They have Eugene Monroe. The Dolphins are with Jake Long. And I think the Panthers are locked on defensive players at this point. So and they gave a lot of money to their left tackle. So, I think it's the Bills. The Bills don't want to pick an offensive lineman because if once Khalil's off the board, I don't think there's an offensive lineman worthy of the 10th best player in the draft.
So it really sounds like the Rams and Vikings should just switch picks, and the Vikings should just pick up a little something extra and take Khalil at 6, because nobody's going to take him 4 or 5.
Right. Now, if they go to 6, they probably will lose Claiborne to Tampa Bay at 5.
That's fine.
Yeah, I think that would be.
Claiborne feels like I could see him being a Buck. The Buck always seem to have these ball-hawking cornerbacks. Since I've grown up, they've always had guys like that. It does seem like that's the right fit. Now, if Blackman falls out of the top 6, because every year there's always that one guy that's just locked into every mock draft, and this guy's going here, and this guy, and then one guy falls out, and everybody's stunned. Oh my God, what happened to this guy? Does feel like that could be Blackman potentially if the Rams pass on him at 6, which they might. So then what happens to him?
I think the Jacks just turn that card, and I think it becomes easy for Jacksonville. I think Jacksonville's sitting there today saying, assuming that those 6 players we talked about are gone, where do they go? They like to trade down. They like to pick Stephen Gilmore, who I have heard they like better than Morris Claiborne. But that being said, trading down is more difficult. I mean, every team from 3 down to 15, they're talking about trading down. Everybody wants to trade back, trying to lure somebody, but the gap of players are so similar that it makes no sense to trade down.
I have a prediction, and I look at the draft in these weird ways. Last year, I think it was last year, the year before, there was that linebacker that ended up going. Was it last year? Who was the linebacker that everybody liked and he ended up going like in the top 8? The middle linebacker. There was only one middle linebacker.
Oh, Rolando McClain?
Yeah. And remember, everyone had him in the middle of the round, but it was clear that he was the only one of his kind, and that maybe somebody was going to jump the gun and go early on him, and that's exactly what happened. Why wouldn't that happen with the BC linebacker again this year?
Oh, I think the BC linebacker is a hot commodity, and I think he could start anywhere from the 9th pick at Carolina. I think they would rather go defensive line. I think Buffalo could pick him, and I think Kansas City certainly in play. And we know Seattle could pick him. I think that's where his portion of the draft is 9 to 12. He's hot.
Yeah.
He's a guy that everybody likes. He's clean. There's really not a lot of downside to him. He can play 3 downs, which ultimately you have to, whereas McClain really can't play 3 downs for the Raiders. McClain's about another cheeseburger away from becoming a defensive tackle.
Well, if Buffalo got him, all of a sudden that's an amazing front 7. That's easily the best front 7 in the league.
I mean, there's no question Buffalo's improving the football team step by step. I think this draft is going to be critical to close the gap. I think Buffalo's going to be a lot like Detroit in the sense where they're no longer going to be an easy out. They obviously can do some things offensively once they can protect a little longer. I mean, they need to improve their offensive line, but if you put another linebacker in there, and the both starters, Kirk Morrison and Nick Barnett, are over 30 years old, so you give them some speed at linebacker, I think that really would help them.
Yeah, we always talk about how important identities are for an NFL team, and how it's not just about throwing talent on the field, it's about what do you do, what are you good at. And if Buffalo goes into next season saying, hey, we're the team that has a really, really good front 7, and we can throw the ball a little bit, and C.J. Spiller can make some plays, and we're going to be tough to beat at home. But that's a real identity. Plus, the Jets are going to be worse, and the Dolphins are going to be worse. I feel like they're a wild card threat next year.
They are, and I mean, even if they picked a Dontario Poe, who people are really, I mean, I know they have Kyle Williams, I know they have Marcel Darius, but I mean, if they got another defensive lineman, much like Detroit did, now all of a sudden the Mario Williams, the Mark Anderson, and maybe Sean Merriman comes along, Chris Kelsey makes a few plays. Now they're a lot better as a football team, and that front 7. You can never have enough good defensive linemen, especially when you're in Buffalo and the weather's going to be bad 2 months of the year.
This is a very important question. I'm jumping ahead on my game plan for the Lombardi podcast. I think, 2 years ago, you loved Jason Pierre-Paul, who was the polarizing defensive guy of that draft, and you went all in on Pierre-Paul stock. And then you came out smelling roses. This year, Dontario Poe. I just can't speak anymore. I probably should have a podcast.
Don't ask me for the pronunciations. I'm the worst.
Well,
that's why we nickname all the players.
Poe is the polarizing guy this year.
Yeah.
So the world is anxiously awaiting Mike Lombardi's take on this.
I like Poe a lot. I think Poe is really a good player. I think he's got a lot of talent. I think he's just skimmed the surface of what he can really become. He's a great kid. If you spend time with him, he'll work hard. And when you take defensive linemen now, with the way the rules are in college football, none of them really know how to play the game. You have to educate them on how to become a better player. And I think Dontario Poe, with his rare size and speed, he's got character. He'll work hard. And if you really study the tape closely, he may not make a lot of plays, but he dominates the line of scrimmage, which essentially you want most defensive linemen to do. I think he's going to be a star. I think he's going to go to the right team that gets him. And a year from now, he'll be a big-time player.
Does he go, like right now, I'm looking at on NFL.com, they have 4 different mock drafts, and he is anywhere from like 15, looks like mid-teens basically. You buying that, or you think he goes higher?
No, I mean, I think he starts from 10 to 20. I think that's going to be where he goes. I know Kansas City's. I think Kansas City likes him. I just don't know if they want to make that pick on a let's say Luke Kuechly goes to the Bills at 10, and I think Kansas City takes Poe at 11. I just don't know if you want to take a nose tackle, but the uniqueness of Poe is he can, you can teach him how to become a really dominant inside pass rusher with that power he has inside. And once you can get him to do that, all of a sudden he can disrupt the game.
This guy, Michael Floyd, the receiver from Notre Dame, looking at these mock drafts, somebody has him going 7, somebody has him going 10, and then all of a sudden he's 19, and where's he? And 17. Now, if Blackman falls out of the top 6, and there's probably not a ton of teams looking for receivers, that's somebody that could just fall.
Yeah, the Floyd, I didn't put him in my mock I did the other day because I didn't know really where to put him. I've heard so many conflicting reports on his off-the-field activities and his interviews with the teams that I don't really know really where I feel comfortable putting him. I've heard from reliable people in the league that he wasn't that impressive in his interviews with the teams, and then I've heard some other different. So it's a lot of conflicting reports, and so I kind of left him out of there. I could see Arizona taking him at 13, but everybody wants Arizona to take another receiver. But has anybody watched Arizona pass protect in the last couple of years?
Yeah.
You think they? I mean, I know they signed Adam Snyder, but I think they have to get more offense. They have to get better offensive linemen. I know they re-signed Levi Brown, but they still need better defensive linemen, and I would suspect that's the way they should go.
We just went 20 minutes without bringing up Ryan Tannehill, which violated all the NFL draft rules that everybody put in this week. Seems like a lot of ado about this guy. Everybody has him penciled in for Miami. Miami had just about the most atrocious offseason you could have as a franchise. I think if you did a poll of fans trusting their front offices, a power poll from most trust to least trust, I think the Dolphins would be 32nd right now. Do they have to take Tannehill?
Well, they're the ones who have propped them up, so they have to take them. I think they will, but I don't think there's this market out there for Ryan Tannehill that everyone suspected 2 weeks ago. I think Minnesota took the full page ad in the paper saying, if you want Ryan Tannehill, come get him here at 3, and that proved to be a futile advertisement. So, I think Ryan Tannehill's loved by Miami. I don't see Arizona being as in love with him. I don't see the Eagles being as in love with him, and I really don't know if the Chiefs are that in love with him. I think it's more about, everybody's trying to prop him up. Now, if he happened to slip to the 20s, which I don't believe he will, I still think he's a top 10 pick and he goes to Miami, then I think some other teams could be interested in him. But that's really where his level of interest should be. It shouldn't be in the top 10. I think Miami's in an act of desperation.
Are we sure Buffalo shouldn't be in the conversation for him?
I think they're the wild card team. I think they should be in the conversation, and it would be the perfect team to pick them because they have Ryan Fitzpatrick for one more year, and that allows Tannehill to grow and develop and become to get another year of seasoning, which he desperately needs. I mean, I could see that. That wouldn't shock me. That wouldn't floor me. Buffalo with a quarterback. I think Buffalo is in the same spot we all are with Fitzpatrick. They like him. They got to make him his guy, but until they can get somebody better, he's their guy.
Well, and then after it seemed like he wasn't their guy after they had given him all the money, then it turns out he was hurt for half the season. So at least it feels like that gave him a 2012 mulligan. I don't know. If I were them, I would rather draft one more killer defensive guy and roll the dice with Fitzpatrick for one more year and see if he's the guy from the first 6 games of the season, basically.
That's always the hardest thing because you want to try to make your team as much as improved as you can, but you can't minimize the quarterback. I mean, I think if you really have a sense that Tannehill can be an elite quarterback, and I'm not sure that I have that sense, but if you really believe that, then they should pick him, and if he's there at 10, because we can always put off the quarterback to next year, but then next year revs up awfully quickly.
The one thing I didn't get, so Seattle goes and they spend all this money on Matt Flynn. And then all of a sudden they're in the rumors for Tannehill to move up or maybe move past Miami or whatever. Seattle, we just saw with San Francisco, like you can turn your team around in a year, especially in the NFC West. Why wouldn't they just pick the best player? I mean, I don't feel like that team's that far away. Why would they even mess around with Tannehill? That doesn't help them.
I don't think they can because, look, football's a mathematical equation. And if you draft Ryan, and maybe the Jets need to understand this, but if you draft Ryan Tannehill, there's not enough reps to go around for Tannehill, for Tavares, and then for Matt Flynn. I mean, you're just basically throwing money away like the Jets did when they signed Drew Stanton and they had to trade him to Indianapolis because, oh, by the way, we're going to get involved in this Tebow thing.
Yeah.
So there's not enough reps to go around. At least the Jets corrected their mistake. It was a $500,000 mistake. They corrected it and shipped Stanton off to somebody else. But you have to look at it analytically and say, look, there's just not enough reps. I've made my decision. We're going to go with Flynn. I mean, when you signed Flynn, when you signed Flynn, Tannehill had to be in that conversation. You had to say to yourself, if we sign Flynn, we're out of Tannehill, correct? Yeah, that's right. You can't have it both ways.
Yeah. Especially at QB, you're all in that position with one guy.
Yeah, there's not enough reps. You're not going to develop anybody. You're going to have too many reps for. You're not going to have enough reps for everybody. You're going to need to figure out how you're going to get your team ready. Remember, this is, and I've said this before, this is not about collecting talent. It's about building a team. And if Seattle selects Tannehill, they're just collecting talent. They're not building a team.
I'm looking at Denver at 25. And, I mean, do you feel like that's a team that could make the Super Bowl next year, or is this like a 3-year plan for them?
Well, I don't know. I mean, that's the hardest question to answer, because what will Peyton Manning be like when he comes back? Where is he? If certainly defensively with Dumerville and Von Miller coming off the edges, I think they certainly could be good enough. I mean, they need more corner help. They need some safety help. They need a lot of things that, but there's something in the back of my head that says they're going to pick a quarterback down there just because they think now's the time to do it. Whether it's Brandon Weeden, I don't know, but it just is an instinct that I have that I think that now that they've gotten rid of Tebow, they can execute their long-range plan.
Well, that's interesting. I wasn't expecting you to say that. I was thinking that maybe Green Bay at 28 would be the team that took a quarterback.
I think Green Bay's like every good drafting team. They'll go in any direction that's the best player on the board. And if they don't, if the best player on the board is at a position they really don't want to pick, they'll trade down.
Because you and I are in the same boat with Denver. I think it seems like most people are just penciling Manning in to just being at least like 90% of what he was in Indianapolis. I feel like if I had to bet on anything, I feel like he's going to play 10 games and that's going to be it. I just don't trust this whole neck surgery thing at all. I don't know. It's really hard for me to believe that anybody can talk about this without bringing up the neck surgery in the first sentence. The fact that he's at 4.
Yeah, I mean, it's so unpredictable. I mean, he's a great player, and he's always going to be a great player, but we haven't seen him get hit. We haven't seen him come back, and even he would be, I mean, I think the league, putting him in Pittsburgh or opening him up with Pittsburgh, I mean, he's not going to be the Peyton Manning of old the first week. If he does, in fact, become Peyton Manning of old, it probably won't happen until after the 8th week of the season.
Right, and good luck with those nationally televised games that the Broncos are going to be in. If there's a 50% chance Peyton's not playing in Week 11, it's just really. I've been confused by the way this whole thing is covered. To me, like once you get cut open 4 times in the same spot, I just don't trust what's going to happen. I really don't. I think I would be more surprised if he played 3 more seasons than if he didn't. So, but what do I know? The Patriots 27. And 31. I'm trying not to get emotionally invested in the last half of the draft because I know that I'm going to get attached to 3 guys, and then right before the Patriots have the pick, they're going to trade backwards. But is there any chance whatsoever they'll just keep these picks?
I think there's a good chance. What people misunderstand about why the trading out of the first round is I think Belichick really did not want to bring somebody in his locker room that was making a lot of money that could have offended somebody else. I think Bill's probably more concerned about his locker room's payroll than anybody because he knows how it affects the dynamics of the locker room. If if he trades up to go get somebody at 3 and, he's got a guy on his team and all of a sudden the new guy comes in, makes more than Tom Brady or is in the top 5 players on a team that really he hasn't done anything for, that's not what he wanted to do. Now I think the market level is reached to the point where if he wanted to go up in the from 27 up to 13 or to 12, then that number's not going to be very bad. It'll fit perfectly into a salary cap structure. So I think now is the time more that becomes tangible that he could do it. In the past, it was more about the player and the value of the player didn't meet.
Yeah. I mean, I know what I want them to do. They never do what I want them to do. But I know I want them to take 2 defensive players. But I have a feeling they're going to trade down in the second round with one of the picks, and then with the other pick, take the Stanford tight end. And then all the Patriot fans are going to look at each other going, wait a second, we have 4 tight ends. What's going on here? Who's playing defense? Who's rushing the passer?
I think the Stanford tight end's a really good player, but I don't think he's going to be a Patriot. I really don't.
All right. That's my fear for this draft. And it's one of those things where because of the track record and the fact that, he's won 3 Super Bowls, he's lost in basically the final minute of 2 others. and you arguably should have made 2 more Super Bowls. It's really tough to complain about the drafting choices of the guy who's done all this. But, it's just over and over again. The Patriot fans leave these drafts just confused.
Well,
should I be excited? Should I not be excited? Like, we just no understanding of what just happened.
It's like anything. I mean, nothing's ever good enough, no matter how many Super Bowls you go to or what you win. That's why they call them fans. I mean, people always want more. I mean, I'm sure in Cleveland they would like to have a few of these problems.
Well, FYI, Mark Anderson and Andre Carter were a pass rush last year.
Right.
Neither of them are on the team anymore.
Yeah, and remember last year in August, I'm not sure there was a lot of people chasing either player. So,
no, you were the only Mark Anderson fan in America, I think.
I think that's part of the strategy and part of the talent that, it takes talent to evaluate talent, so you better find a guy. I mean, you can't close your franchise up because you lose a player. You have to find another guy. And then in the NFL, unlike basketball, it's easy to find guys if you can fit them in the role. I mean, look, Tolabante King got 10 sacks for him 1 year.
Yeah. Well, I like Mark Anderson, and he went to the Bills. And as we were talking, I looked it up. The Bills, 50-1 to win the Super Bowl this year. Pretty intriguing. Like, when you think, I remember last year we were having the same conversation. Like, man, if the Lions had a good draft here, they might be an interesting possible playoff team. Oh, no, that's crazy. To me, the Bills could absolutely be this year's Lions. All right, we went this far without talking about the top 2 QBs. I don't remember a draft that had less drama with the top 2 picks. Griffin, it was interesting. I was listening to Colin Cowherd the other day, driving around, and he took an angle that I actually kind of liked. He was saying how Griffin, he doesn't understand, like he feels like this was much more of a high-risk move for the Redskins than people have given it credit for. Like, that it really could not work out, and that here's a guy who's really only played 2 full seasons in college, who's a running quarterback, who could take hits, and the success of running quarterbacks staying on the field isn't that great. Like, he really felt he opened the door basically in this segment. Like, what if this turns out to be a disaster? What if this turns out to be one of the worst trades of all time? Where do you stand on what they gave up for him and the possibility of him staying on the field and all that stuff?
Well, I like the trade. I think it was a trade the Redskins had to make, because they're going to be a good team defensively if they can stay healthy, and they needed the one player. Now, I think they have to tailor their team around the skills of Griffin. I think when you have him, you better throw the ball down the field. You better not worry about percentage of completion as much as you worry about making big chunks of yards down the field. I think he'll run the system really well. I think the Redskins could use another big-time running back to go with them. And obviously, whether it's this year or down the road, but I'm sure they'll find a running back. But I think with him as the cornerstone of their franchise, I think it gives them a chance to really now catch some of the other people in the division, which they weren't going to do unless they made this move. I mean, you have to trust your instincts, you have to trust your evaluation, and you've got to make sure that you put the right pieces around him. I think Griffin's talents are he's going to throw the ball, he's got a lot of loose plays. I think you need vertical outside speed receivers. I don't think you need receivers that are as much about yards after the catch as they are about really separating and taking the top off the defense.
Well, for the record, I like the trade, and I think it was worth the gamble. And the other thing is, people are like, they give up 3 first-rounders to get him. No, they actually give up 2, because they put one of the first-rounders they're using to take him. They moved from 6 to 2, or what was it, 6? Yeah, 6 to 2, and they give up 2 extra first-rounders to do that plus a second-rounder. But I like the trade. I was fine with it. I still, I think Luck is a much, much, much safer bet. You agree with that, right?
Yeah, I mean, look, Luck and the style of team you're going to have around Luck is going to be different too. Now I think Luck needs yards after the catch receivers. I think Luck needs to control the middle of the field. Luck is a guy that really could get you into the right play. Not that Griffins can't do all the things mentally, but I think it's just 2 different styles. And I think that the team that takes these guys, you better tailor the style of player around the quarterback and make sure you give him all the things he needs to be initially successful right away.
All right, unpopular opinion alert. As copyright Dave Jacoby for that phrase. If I'm Andrew Luck, aren't I kind of bummed out that I'm going to Indianapolis? I mean, think about it. Like, 1, totally rebuilding team. Like, they were terrible last year. They're going to be just as terrible this year. 2, kind of a crazy owner. I don't know. I mean, I think he's one of the wild card owners that the league has right now. And then 3, you're following one of the 4 or 5 best quarterbacks of all time. Like, I don't know. Like, how could he be? And 4, you're in a small market. Like, I don't know how I'd be that happy about this whole situation if I'm him. What do you think?
Well, I think the market, everybody talks about the market. I think the NFL's the market now. I don't think it's just about the cities
Fair
and
point.
the age of internet. I mean, you could play in Timbuktu and people are going to know who you are. So I don't know that the NFL will carry that. I think, it's hard to follow. It's hard to follow Peyton. I don't disagree with that at all. But look, nobody's expectations are going to be as high as they would be when Peyton was on the team because everybody still thought the team would be pretty good. So, I thought it was interesting that Reggie Wayne decided to sign back there. I thought it was interesting that Robert Mathis, they're not really, they're trying to keep some pieces together so they don't look as bad as they potentially could have looked. And the one thing about the NFL, you're not that far to turn things around. If you get really good quarterback play and you can repair your defensive and offensive lines, you got a chance to get right back in it. All we have to do is look at the 49ers.
Yep. Do you see a team this year making one of those all-in poker moves like Atlanta did last year with Julio Jones and just saying, screw it, we're going for it, and making one of those rash, kind of ill-fated decisions?
Typically your instincts would say, well, the Jets have always wanted to do that. They've always liked to trade up. I just don't know. I could see the Jets being a team to go all in to get Trent Richardson. To me, that would make a lot of sense if I were a Jet fan because then it would give them a legitimate blue-chip running back, something they don't have. But other than the Jets, I can't really see a team acting, the style and the background of some of the guys making these decisions don't lend itself to be in that kind of way. I think Atlanta miscalculated who they were as a team, whether they agreed with it or not. I mean, they weren't one player away from winning the Super Bowl. They're still not one player away from winning the Super Bowl or competing for one. And I don't think the Eagles, which are typically a team that likes to take some chances, I get the sense out of Philadelphia they're re-signing their own players. I think they're more about the locker room and keeping harmony than they are anything else.
All right, you're running the Vikings. The Jets come to you and they say, what would it take to move up to number 3? We have number 16. What else would you want? What do you tell them?
Well, to go that many picks, it would probably, I would tell them I want next year's 1.
And
something this year. So 3 probably would take next year's 1 and a 3, and you could get it done. Now, I think if you're the Jets and you have your quarterback of the future, Mark Sanchez or Tim Tebow, whichever one you believe is, and you get a blue chip running back, is it worth giving up a first round pick the next year? I don't know. I think that's a tough decision you've got to make. But I know this Trent Richardson would make your quarterback a lot better. I know that.
Well, let me throw in the part where if the Jets don't do well this season, everybody's going to get fired on that team, including the GM and the coach.
Well, I don't ever believe the GM will get fired, but I think the coach could because, obviously expectations in New York are always high, and who could predict what Rex could possibly say between now and then if things don't go well. But, I think the architect of the team will always stay there.
All right, let's say the Vikings say, all right, we'll take number 16, we'll take your number 1 next year, we'll take a 3rd in this draft, and we want Sean Green.
I think you make the trade.
I think you do too.
I think you make the trade. I think that's the thing is the Jets always say 2 different things. They want to be ground and pound, but they have a running back who's really not an elite back. And to be ground and pound, you better have an elite back. And I think that would be, to me, if I was in New York, that's what I would want to do is find an elite back.
Now all of a sudden, yeah, you have Richardson, you get a little Tebow-Richardson combo. Let's get the Jets fans excited about this. I think the Jets are in like kind of that no man's land where they either need to go all in or they need to change. They need to do something. I don't know what their game plan is
right now. The problem is that the strength of their team is the biggest concern of their team, their defense. I mean, they need to find a pass rusher. They need to improve the defense. The head coach is a defensive coach. As much as he talks about how much he loves every player on defense, they still – remember, they wanted to cut Bart Scott until they realized they couldn't get out of the guarantee. So they got some issues with some of the players on the team, and they have to repair their secondary. LaRon Landry isn't in their off-season program. I mean, he went to two other teams this year, and he couldn't pass the physical. He passed the Jets, but he still tended to touch on the Achilles. So whether he can get on the field or not remains to be seen. Maybe he can, but I think a lot of teams in the NFL are skeptical. I know the Redskins and the Patriots felt like he needed to have a procedure on his Achilles. If he doesn't come through for him, where's their safety answer?
Your favorite round 1 sleeper?
I love Chandler Jones. I think Chandler Jones is a guy nobody talks about. I think he's got a lot of Simeon Rice in his ability to rush the passer. I think the Shea McKellen kid's a really good football player. I'm too old, but he reminds me a lot of Carl Mecklenburg. He can do a lot of different things on the field.
I like that reference.
I think he's really a good football player. I like Nick Perry. I think Nick Perry has a lot of Lamar Woodley in his game. I could see that. Those guys, to me, are the ones that I think that I gravitate to, in terms of being guys that could come in and make an impact as a football player.
I will say I have my eye on this Dante Hightower because he has the apostrophe between the T and the A, which hasn't really been tried that much. Amara Stoudemire probably did the most famously, but that's going to be interesting if his career takes off.
He's a really good football player, and he's going to be his career will take off because he's a 3-down linebacker who can play downhill. Kuechly is a guy that's talked about, as a downhill player, as a great linebacker, but he never plays anything downhill. Kuechly's more about pass defense. He'll impact the game. And really an area we don't talk about much is the red zone defense. If your middle linebacker can really play pass coverage, your red zone will be a lot more effective because a lot of the routes are down there, they really work off the Mike backer. And if you have a guy that can cover in there, that really helps strengthen your red zone defense. And I think he'll do that for a team. If he went to Kansas City, for example, I think that certainly would help it.
Well, I love Chandler Jones just because I think that's not only do I like what I've read about him, but a very strong name. I love the names. Could totally see Chandler Jones making big plays. The other name that I really like, Ruben Randall, LSU receiver. That's a great name. I could totally see Ruben Randall making 5 All-Pro teams.
I think Ruben Randall's going to need a lot. One thing about the LSU passing game, I think it's going to take a little time to get him seasoned to be a good pro. There's certain places where their offense is tailored around the running game, and in LSU that happens to be the case. I'm not sure Ruben Randall's ready for prime time the first year in the league.
Uh-oh. That sounds like a Patriots second-round pick bust waiting to
No,
happen.
I don't think you'll see the Patriots pick him. I don't think that'll be a consideration there.
I have to ask you while you're on the phone. Oh, one more question about sleepers. Your favorite QB sleeper. You always seem to have one guy you like in that second round, maybe third round.
I don't really – this year, I don't have one this year because, what's happened to the draft now is there's no longer – every quarterback that's a sleeper becomes he's now the guy. I mean – it's either a first round. I mean, look, Tannehill should be a second round pick, but he's moved his way up to the first round. Brandon Weeden, I think, is really going to take some time as a player. And after that, I'm not on the Kirk Cousins bandwagon. I haven't gotten there yet. So and Brock Osweiler, I'm not on that one either. So I don't really have anybody that I'm in love with there.
I thought maybe you would have talked yourself into the Boise State quarterback.
No, I think Boise State's a remarkable program. I think they've got some of my favorite players on their team, whether it's Crawford, the defensive lineman. McKell and I talked about already. Billy Wynn's a really good player, too. It's remarkable the job they've been able to do to accumulate that much talent up there.
All right, last big question. What in the hell is going on with the Saints? Now this Rita Benson thing, that she's basically on a 3-month, she's been pushed out. Or maybe pushed out, but nobody knows. Can you ever remember a team that was considered to be like a quote-unquote model franchise falling apart like this?
No, I think obviously there's, we often talk about losing has a lot of problems. When you win and consistently win, there's probably more problems for the NFL teams than ever. And how you handle winning is certainly an important factor. I think the football operation this year has been obviously disappointing with the Greg Williams and Sean Payton's paid a tremendous price for it. But I think the football end, on the Rita end of it, I'm not sure how much that actually will impact. I think it will impact the succession plan of ownership. I'm not sure it will actually impact the fundamental team on the field.
All the people you're talking with all the time, how much does the Saints come up? Is this like a bigger story like in the circles, or is it not as big?
I think the Drew Brees, the reluctance of them to get Drew Brees signed is probably the bigger story I hear on my phone more than anybody. It doesn't seem that they want to acknowledge that Brees belongs in Peyton Manning's new contract class. I think that they haven't even guaranteed him as much money as Mario Williams received from the Buffalo Bills. So I think the reality is my phone conversations aren't about Rita or Sean Payton's suspension. They're more about when are they going to get Drew Brees signed and how can they play this kind of hardball with Drew Brees.
And walk me, I don't know all the particulars to this. What happens if they don't sign him before the season?
Well, he's not going to come in and play. I mean, the reality here is he played in San Diego on a franchise tender, and he got his shoulder injured and almost lost his NFL career because it came down to 2 teams. Miami failed him on a physical, and then the Saints got him because of that. and no other team really were after him because of the injury. So he's not going to come back and play without Sean Payton there. I think without Sean and then without Breeze, I think it becomes a little difficult situation. I don't see the Saints being the top team in the NFC South with Chase Daniels at quarterback. But if they get him signed, I think he can certainly carry the load that they need to do. But for me, Bill, to me, I don't understand why it's taken this long. I don't think Drew Brees can do any more on the field that you wouldn't want to say he's as close to Peyton, maybe if not better than Peyton right now.
Last question, most important of the whole podcast. You're not allowed to discuss gambling lines because you work for the NFL. But let's just say that you could gamble on the 2013 Super Bowl. And right now is a really good time to do that because you don't know how the draft's going to play out, but we have kind of an idea of free agency and the stuff that happened there. What team do you think has used free agency and is going to use the draft on Thursday as a combo to propel them from obscurity into the playoff picture?
Well, I don't think the 49ers are obscure, but I think when you return all the players they return on defense, I think they certainly can make a statement with that. And I think the Cowboys are sitting in a prime position. They have a really good team. If they can make a couple moves in this draft to really get themselves over the hump, I think that'll be significant. And then I think the other factor is the Eagles. I think the Eagles have a collection of players that once they can sort through and get it better on the team. Now, the caveat with the Eagles will be, can Mike Vick stay healthy? And I think that remains to be seen. But I think those three teams, you have to say, are clearly have a chance. The Texans need a really good draft because they have to repair their offensive line. They've got a couple issues they need to take care of. They have a tougher schedule coming into town. So, those teams, to me, I think Dallas, I think San Francisco, and I think Philadelphia are the teams you have to look at and say, wow, if they do a couple things, they could really make a difference. I thought if Cincinnati would have made the play for Mike Wallace and given up one of those picks, I might have said Cincinnati. But they were never going to do that. That was just my idea.
Yeah, but they should have. And it makes me mad that nobody – how does Pittsburgh just get to bring Mike Wallace back with no pressure put on – just from a competitive thing if you're another team? Don't you want to put pressure on Pittsburgh?
Cincinnati could have easily done it, and they could have done it with a number that they could have had two of the best receivers in the game, Mike Wallace and A.J. Green, to go with a quarterback. I think it's a no-brainer. And I know it's going to cost some money, but at some point they're going to have to spend a little bit.
All right, so our final recommendation is put some pressure on Mike Wallace, which they didn't do. But we have this recommendation for the Rams. Trade up for Trent Richardson. Trade up to the 3. And then move Steven Jackson somewhere else. We both approve that, right?
Yeah, and Steven Jackson, it's going to be a hard guy to move, but I don't think you want to pay. You don't want to pay for a guy especially as you're rebuilding. You might as well start with a young team that's going to get you there. I don't think Steven Jackson's going to be as good as by the time the Rams are good, I don't know if Steven Jackson will still be there.
The Lions, maybe, for him?
The Lions have a real good chance. But they have this draft isn't working out in the Lions' favor. They need a left tackle. They need some things in their offensive line, and this draft doesn't really lend itself to be able to get that. Now, they might hit a 3-run homer. Maybe they take Mike Adams at a part in the draft where they feel comfortable with his off-the-field stuff, and he gives them a left tackle. But I think that remains to be seen yet.
All right. I feel like I have a better feel of this draft now. Thank you, Mike.
I hope so.
How are you spending the week?
I'm going to be here in New York just covering and listening to all the Minnesota Vikings trying to see if they can sell their pick. I'm expecting a bulletin board on 42nd Street too. Trade for our pick, please.
Maybe they'll ask you to wear a T-shirt on the air.
Yeah.
Maybe you get a little extra
Save our
cash.
pick, please. Trade for our pick. Yeah.
Cash that way. I guess this is to be the last. Did you watch Mad Men last night?
Of course. Yeah, of course. And this hotel here at the Parker Meridian is had it, and I was delighted. But I will say this, the highlight of my day, Bill, so far today, and I must share this with you, is I had a great opportunity to walk over to Random House and meet Robert Caro and have an autograph signed of him on his new book, The Passage of Power. It was as delightful of a day as I think I could possibly ever have.
So now you get to read that book all week instead of studying for the draft.
It's sitting right here in my room, and I'm going to dive right into it. And what a wonderful man. He's a huge New York Giant fan, as it turns out.
Well, this is going to be the best one, right? It's all about there's a big part of it. It's about the JFK part.
Yeah, he was telling me, and I'm a huge RFK fan, and he said, you'll love this book because there's a lot of RFK in it, and he breaks it down. And, it's remarkable if you've ever studied this guy. his work ethic is incredible, and his ability to research without using a lot of the new age tools and the information he gleans from it. His passage on the passage of power from Kennedy when he was assassinated to Lyndon Johnson is a fascinating chapter. I read it in the New Yorker last week, and he never once mentioned Lee Harvey Oswald in the entire section, because that's what he didn't want to do. He wanted to make it about the change of power, but he's a remarkable man.
So we can fully expect some sort of a Lyndon B. Johnson NFL parallel column within the next 2.5 weeks, I'm guessing.
It's coming soon. Yeah, it's definitely coming. I'm going to make sure of it.
Can you work Roger Sterling in there somehow?
I don't know. Could Sterling have had a better week than he had 2 weeks ago, really? When the fight was going on, I don't know if he could have had a better week. And I think one of the best scenes of Mad Men had to be when he walked in with Peggy and they had that going back and forth, and it cost him $400. I thought that was one of the best scenes of Mad Men's career. You know, it's like I told somebody this the other day. The best scene of The Sopranos, it really summed up everything, was when Tony was asking Melfi for advice on what to do with Vito. And it's the famous "he's gay" scene, you know. And to me, that's the essence of that whole series. If you listen to those 7 minutes of that scene, it's the same thing with Roger and Peggy. I thought that was the essence of what the show's all about.
It's going to be very interesting to see who holds on longer, Roger Sterling or Rex Ryan. Right now, I have Roger favored by 1.5 weeks, but that could change depending on this draft.
I just want to, now that we know where Roger lives, I think I'm going to go back over and see if he's at the house. I'm in New York.
All right, Mike Lombardi.
Thanks,
I'm sure we'll see you on the NFL Network for at least 20 hours this week. Good luck with everything.
My head's buried in the Robert Caro book. Thanks, Bill.
All right, take care.
So I get to sign off. Whoa.
Thank you for downloading the BS Report with Bill Simmons.
Too much fun.
Check out more podcasts at the iTunes Music Store or at Podcenter at ESPNRadio.com.
Peace out.
Bill's dropping the mic for the day, but keep those headphones on and speakers on, then crank up the volume, because there's some big news from Subway. Talking absolutely huge. This April only, you can get a 6-inch sandwich absolutely free when you purchase a 6-inch sandwich before 9 a.m. That's right. Get one free when you buy one. From the irresistible steak, egg, and cheese to the tender turkey breast, piled high with all your favorite veggies on freshly baked bread. Hurry in before 9 a.m. to get your free sandwich today. Subway. Eat fresh.